Good afternoon, everybody. As mentioned, I'm Sarah Vogel. I'm the horticulture educator for DeWitt, Macon, and Piatt counties here in Illinois. I'm based in Decatur, and I am here to talk with you today about the invasive Callery pear, and not just 8 replacements, but 8 great replacements for the invasive Callery pear. Because not only are they great, but I like things that rhyme. So I will address some of the questions as we get started here. Oops, excuse me. So let's just start out kind of with some definitions and terminology here. What exactly are non-native invasive plant species? So non-native invasive plants are ecologically or economically damaging species, and they've been introduced into areas where they have not historically been found. Okay, so these plants are going to grow with very little environmental control to keep their populations low, partly because they are not in their natural range with their natural predators and diseases, from their native geography. So invasives will continue to, increase in abundance until they can cause some real damage in our natural ecosystems by changing habitat for wildlife and impacting native plants. And forests and agricultural resources, all of the above. And again, on some terminology, because we throw some of these terms around somewhat loosely, somewhat interchangeably, but just to kind of demarcate one from another. So a native plant is one that's developed over hundreds or thousands of years in a particular region or ecosystem. These species have probably evolved in a specific geographic area. With natives, you may also hear them referred to as endemic. And so these are adapted to a specific location, and they do fill a need, a particular niche in that local environment. And you hear natives touted a lot for garden use. I'll go ahead and say it out loud. Just because something is made native doesn't always mean it's a great garden plant. Some things can get a little wild too. Then we have established species. Sometimes this is called naturalized species, but really established is a better term because these species, they have kind of a self-sustaining and reproducing population in that specified geographic area without the need for human intervention. So they will not ever become members of a local plant community over time. But they are established there and don't necessarily cause harm. So, for instance, the sugar maple tree is a species that's native to all parts of Illinois. Okay, whereas the red maple is native only to the lower third of Illinois, but obviously we see it planted all over the state. And then another established plant that you may or may not know, Osage orange, also known as hedge apple. We see it everywhere, doesn't cause problems. There's lots of different uses that people have found for it. It's native only to a small area in Texas, but it is established in Illinois. So again, it will never be considered a native Illinois species, but doesn't cause harm while it's here. And then non-native species, these do not occur naturally in a specified area. These have been introduced by humans, whether intentionally or not. Doesn't necessarily, if something's non-native, it doesn't necessarily mean it's invasive or even aggressive. Sometimes non-natives are referred to as exotic or alien or introduced. We'll say introduced species. So this might be something like daffodils. They're native to Europe and parts of North Africa, but they do quite well here. And who doesn't love a daffodil in spring? Then just a little kind of delineation here between aggressive and invasive, because I hear these, I think we all maybe hear these or sometimes use them interchangeably. Aggressive and invasive are not necessarily the same thing, because aggressive is, kind of takes over maybe in your garden, but invasive is a very specific type of species that does cause harm to a native ecosystem. So aggressive, yeah, they can spread rapidly, can be native, Some natives are very aggressive, can be non-native. It can vary in its aggressiveness. Where invasive, yes, these are usually aggressive, and we'll talk about the ways in which they are. Non-native species whose presence causes economic or environmental harm. So let's just have a look at one and the other here. The lovely dandelion on the left, they are prolific seeders. As many know, you can pick up the little seed heads and blow them all over. The wind, seed dispersed through wind. And they're a bit aggressive. They can get into lots of different places, but these are not wrecking any habitat anywhere. Compare that with garlic mustard on the right. It may be somewhat of a pretty plant, some might say, but it will cover the forest floor. It can outcompete natives for moisture and nutrients. In large populations, garlic mustard can reduce the soil nutrients in the soil and release an allelopathic chemical compound that's going to slow the growth of other plants. So it is truly an invasive because these impact the ecosystem and reduce the ability to harvest timber, to hunt, forage, and just simply enjoy the wildflowers and birds of a healthy forest. So how do plants become invasive? How do we decide that they are invasive? Well, we said, invasives are labeled that because they do harm. Here's how they do it. They are better or faster at competing for resources than are the native or established species there. So whether that's light, water, nutrients, space, they will outcompete many of our native species. So they have oftentimes very high seed production. They have a longer growing season. For instance, this image is a bush honeysuckle, and you can see, maybe if you can see the background there, the honeysuckle is fully leafed out in spring, while the other deciduous stuff behind there, they're just starting to leaf out. So that extends the growing season for bush honeysuckle, and it is already way ahead of some of the other species around it once they leaf out. So when you hear things, phrases like, well, it's hardy and it's easy to grow, that might mean that it is a species generalist, that it will grow anywhere under any conditions, right? Not always a good thing if it's an invasive species. If you hear that it's low maintenance, it might mean that it outcompetes other plants. If you hear, oh, it's easy to propagate, that means it's probably a pretty prolific reproducer. Or if it has showy or abundant flowers, it's going to have a large amount of seed, right? And if it attracts birds too, those seeds are going to be dispersed far and wide, right? And so how did invasive species get here? Well, through lots of methods. So sometimes things come in, in other seeds or plants, sometimes on boats, like in ballast water. And packing material, emerald ash borer is thought to have come from pallets and shipping. And the spotted lantern, I'm sorry, not spotted lanternfly. I'll just skip over that for now. So accidental is certainly one way. Intentional is another way that they come in. So sometimes we've been told, even by government entities at one time, that to use certain species because they will help with erosion control. Maybe they are good for wildlife. But 82% of invasive woody species in North America were introduced through horticultural ornamentals, through landscaping. In fact, this is like the major pathway of introduction and spread. So between 1967 and 2005, the number of horticultural cultivars that are out there offered went from around 20,000 to around 105,000 numbers of cultivars. Okay, that's a lot of breeding we're doing, hybridization and so on. And when we do ornamental landscaping, we might use things like this Japanese barberry. That is a beautiful plant. I have been guilty of planting that in the past until I learned that it is in fact considered an invasive species in parts of the state. And we'll talk a little bit about why they're invasive yet still um, able to be bought, sold, and planted. Some of the others you might be familiar with might be the burning bush, a lovely and beautiful plant, super duper invasive in many areas. Winter creeper, this little vine that grows everywhere, invasive in Illinois. Not a tree or shrub, but I thought I'd throw it in there because you can still find it for sale here and there. The lovely mimosa tree, really beautiful. I was sorry to hear this one too, but it really can take over some native ecosystems. Our beloved Norway maple, or for some beloved, these are those kind of purple-leaved maples, Emerald Queen or Crimson King or names like that, have been listed as invasive species. And even our multiflora rose here, that's been on the list for a while. I don't think that you're able to buy or sell that one any longer. So why are these still planted? Well, lack of knowledge. Many don't know that some of these species are invasive, or they don't, lack of understanding, they don't realize the repercussions. Or perhaps plants have been mislabeled here and there, and so it's a case of mistaken identity. So how do we control or regulate these species? That is through the Illinois Exotic Weed Act, which lists that it's illegal for anyone to buy, sell, distribute, or plant any parts of these listed species without a permit, except, commercial propagation for sale outside of the state of Illinois. But the last time this was updated was in, I believe, 2015 or maybe 16. And so since that time, there have been several species, that have been brought to in a species of concern that have not yet made this list. And so, because these invasive species are going to constitute like a primary threat to our natural areas, prevention is really one of the most effective and cost-efficient means of managing invasive plants. So regulations are just one tool used to help prevention efforts. There are lots of different laws and administrative rules that regulate plants. And this is the primary means of regulating the movement of invasive species. So this is administered by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources makes it illegal for anyone to buy, sell, distribute, or plant any parts without a permit. So this is a great tool to have, but if it doesn't include all of the species that we know to be invasive on it, it's not yet up to date. So talking a little bit about our Callery pear specifically, Callery pear, I just want to make a quick note here. When I say Callery pear, this includes Bradford pear, maybe cultivated varieties like Cleveland Select or Chanticleer. Those are all in the same group here. Those are exactly what I'm talking about. Bradford and Callery, you can just about use those interchangeably. So Callery pear was initially brought here as a rootstock. And it was used because it was disease resistant, specifically to fire blight. So it was really widely used. It was supposed to be a sterile ornamental flowering tree. But then, come to find out, it outcompetes our native species and had really negative effects on native ecosystems. And birds can take the seed, all over the place. Trees form dense thickets and can simply outcompete native plants. But again, it has not yet made the list of plants included in the Illinois Exotic Weed Act. So it's still bought, sold, planted, and short of this policy change, we have educational outreach and word of mouth as the best ways to combat this practice. Also, though it's still really commonly bought, sold, and planted, Callery pear is not really that great of a choice for the landscape anyway, due to its susceptibility to breakage and high winds. It was first shown by Michael Durr, who wrote the Manual of Woody Landscape Plants, sort of the Bible in the horticulture industry. He took notice that this upright growth habit of the Callery pear causes for a lot of these codominant stems, which are thereby going to compromise the tree's structural integrity. So if you've had or seen some of them split in high winds, they just absolutely fall apart. They just peel apart. So what trees do make good replacements? Maybe we're thinking about maybe your Callery or Bradford pear did split out in one of these windstorms recently here. Or maybe you're ready to just say goodbye to it and move on. Maybe you don't like the smell of the flowers. You can count me in that group. Um, so we're looking at different replacements or alternatives. And there are numerous species out there that make suitable alternatives or replacements, including many Illinois natives. So we're just going to talk about a few so I don't keep you until tomorrow. So we're going to start with kind of maybe a little more commonly known ones. Um, First of which is the eastern redbud, a small deciduous tree, um, vibrant pink flowers that most of us are familiar with. What's really cool about the blooms is that they occur directly on the branches before the leaves appear. Most of the time, we're going to see our flower buds at the ends of the branches, but flowers bloom directly on the branches of this um, through it's called cauliflory when that happens. And so these beautiful pink flowers are going to add a splash of color, to the dull gray of early spring and really can be a valuable resource for pollinators, including hummingbirds. The birds will eat the flower and bud seeds, where the hummingbirds will specifically eat the nectar. Part shade is best in super hot summer climates. Like a dogwood, it will also perform in full sun. Both of those can kind of go back and forth. Also, like a dogwood, red is quite susceptible to verticillium wilt. That is a fungal disease, soil-borne, that affects numerous species and for which there is really no effective treatment beyond prevention. So hardy zones 5 to 9, 20 feet tall and wide, and sun or shade as mentioned. And it will adapt to a range of different soils. It'll even put up with a little bit of compaction in some of our urban soils. And here's a lovely image of those beautiful pink spring flowers, and down on the bottom right there, the foliage, those beautiful heart-shaped leaves. Next is flowering dogwood, native to the eastern US and only certain counties in Illinois. It is marginally hardy when you start getting up north, so you may have experienced some of that. Again, 20 feet tall and wide, sometimes a rounded shape. The flowers can be this lovely pink or white, you'll see in a little more nature. Just a beautiful native tree with year-round seasonal interest. It does produce fruit, but please don't eat it. It's food for many songbirds. A little bright red little droop of a fruit. It's pretty bitter to humans. When we talk about the flowers here, the pink part that looks like petals are actually bracts that appear to be flower petals. The flowers are actually the small, kind of inconspicuous greenish yellow bumps in the middle there. And there's a lot of cultivated varieties that boast more colorful flowers, maybe different fruit, fall leaf color, something like that. Some research suggests that cultivars are not as beneficial to pollinators and other wildlife. And we'll look at some of those cultivated varieties here. You can see on the bottom right some of the lovely fall color that dogwoods offer. They are a really great tree. Next, we have American fringe tree, maybe not as commonly used as the first two, certainly a competitor for beauty in terms of that, native to pretty much the eastern United States from zones 3 to 9, so that's a wide range. It is adaptable to many soils. It prefers slightly acidic, but is quite adaptable. Anywhere from 12 to 20 feet tall and wide. It has these beautiful, showy, fragrant white flowers, okay, that look fringy. So that's where it gets its common name. The botanical name, Chionanthus virginicus, is from the Greek word chion, meaning snow, and anthos, meaning flower. So there you go. Fun fact. It will tolerate some clay soil, has lovely yellow fall color. Um, partial shade or to full sun, though part shade is going to bring out the best fall color. So and then with age, the branches become kind of irregular and have somewhat of this architectural interest in winter. So there's a picture of some of the flowers close up and from far away in a garden. And then in the middle there, the beautiful gold fall color. Next is American hornbeam, Carpinus caroliniana. Not to be confused with hop hornbeam, which is Australia virginiana, I believe. Those are also great trees. I just didn't cover them in this one. So this is American hornbeam, also called musclewood sometimes. It's a medium-sized tree with a very distinctive mussel-like fluted bark, very hard wood. While it's not necessarily known for showy flowers, it does produce little subtle catkins in the spring. It is valued certainly for its unique form and these attractive kind of doubly serrated leaves that turn yellow-orange in fall. It is an understory tree in its natural habitat, but hornbeam does tolerate a range of conditions, including clay soil, as well as the allelopathic chemical juglone from black walnut trees. Prefers partial shade to full sun, tolerates full sun, but it's not as tolerant of full sun in our warmer climates, so something to keep in mind. So here's kind of at the top left, a picture of the tree from far away. You can see that shape of it, and then some of the fall color with the little flowers there in the middle. Because this plant is in the ash family, it could be susceptible to emerald ash borer. There aren't really conclusive studies either way on that. Next, we have red buckeye, Aesculus pavia. It is native to the southeast US, will live in zones 4 to 8, so again, pretty large range there. In late spring, red buckeye has these 6 to 10 inch long panicles of just gorgeous orange-red flowers. These are going to attract hummingbirds. The blooms kind of give way to these shiny brown seeds inside of a little capsule, a smooth husk. They have palmately compound leaves that we'll look at here in a moment that are a real glossy green in the summer. Leaves often drop early in fall, so just to note that. It is native only, again, to the very southern tips of Illinois, and it's deer resistant. So the stems, deer resistant doesn't mean deer proof, as we all know. But the stems and leaves are toxic to many animals, including humans. I understand also some domesticated animals like cats and dogs. I'm not a veterinarian, I just play one on TV, but glad to look into that for anybody. The size is listed anywhere from 10 feet to 40 feet high or 10 feet to 30 feet wide. So that's going to really depend on the cultivars as well as the environmental conditions that it's in. So from left to right, we have, you can see that oppositely arranged palmately compound foliage with the little capsules there, and kind of center on the top there, there's the little nuts inside. In the middle, we have, I believe that's an image of the cultivated variety Fort McNair, if I'm not mistaken. So a little bit of a different color than the straight red. But I will say, just the standard species, the flowers are still absolutely stunning on this tree. Next, we have Serviceberry, fantastic performer of a tree. Okay, so it's a small native tree that offers ornamental appeal. That's kind of similar to Callery Pear. Honestly, it has showy white flowers in the spring that result in this little colorful, edible summer fruit that will attract birds and other wildlife. They are hardy to zone 4 and prefer moist, well-drained soil that's slightly acidic, but again, tolerate many types of soil in our community or urban environments. Lots of different species here. We have downy serviceberry that offers beauty in pretty much every season. We have smooth shadbush, which is Amelanchier laevis, that has very tasty fruit, apparently. And then autumn brilliance is a Amelanchier hybrid grandiflora. So it's a natural hybrid, excuse me, of the downy serviceberry and smooth shadbush. That these are really commonly used in yards and parks. It is, because it's in the apple family, it can be susceptible to apple family diseases. And again, just the kind of silvery gray bark and this beautiful architectural multi-stemmed form, fantastic fall color, just a really great tree all the way around. We have American hazelnut. Again, native to Eastern North America from zones 4 to 9. A little bit smaller now, 10 to 12 feet tall and wide. Often a rounded shape, often multi-stemmed. So just be aware of that if you're looking for a single stem tree. Some of these will come in both clump form, both multi-stem form, as well as single stem. You're looking at full sun to part shade. It can tolerate some drought and will have flowers in the spring. This image here is of the female flowers that have been fertilized and are now growing a little nutlet inside there. And those nuts will be edible once they mature in fall. Absolutely beautiful foliage, a little bit reminiscent. The foliage is a little reminiscent of alder. That's because it too is in the same family. Or sometimes I think it kind of looks like witch hazel foliage as well. So I'm just going to flip back here really quick. The hazelnut is monoecious. So that means there are separate male and female flowers, but male and female flowers occur on the same tree, okay, on one tree, so monoecious. So this is the female flowers. The second image from the left here, those long kind of dangly things, those are catkins. Those are the male flowers. Then you can see at the top right, the little nut, once the kind of husk is removed there, and at the bottom right our lovely yellow fall color. Then we have Carolina silverbell, Halesia carolina. So these are oval to rounded, kind of medium-sized tree. They have these cute little pendulous bell-shaped flowers in the spring. Great yellow fall color. It will tolerate heat or it will tolerate drought, but it doesn't really like heat and drought together. It's going to have a tough time in that. Also has a hard time in compacted soil. So if you're going to use this species, maybe not right up where there's a lot of foot traffic in your yard or something like that. Maybe in the back where it can be kind of a showpiece. Often they will drop leaves early and have, again, great fall color. I actually think the bark is kind of interesting on this one too. It's a really pretty kind of two-toned, stripy bark. And here's some images at the top right. That's kind of a full tree looking up. In the middle there, you see a young tree, and then some of the foliage and the little bell-shaped flowers. So those are 8 great tree replacements. I will go into just a couple shrubby alternatives because sometimes we think a tree belongs in our yard when maybe that was too large a choice. And now we're, removing limbs every year to keep it off the roof or whatever the case may be. Maybe you need something a little smaller to fit the bill there. And oftentimes multi-stem trees and shrubs can fill that void. So the first one I'm going to cover here is Eastern Wahoo, a fantastic plant, uncommonly used, I would say. I don't see it all that often. Native to the Eastern North America, a really wide range of 3 to 7, zones 3 to 7. It's kind of a low branch, more spreading form. Does like some partial shade, but will tolerate full sun. Will do pretty well in lots of different types of soils. They have these lovely little burgundy blooms in June that result in showy red berries that will attract birds. So you can see on the left here, kind of a small, inconspicuous bloom. It is a pretty color. It may not be super noticeable, but then the little fruits are pretty interesting to look at. And then again, the fall color on this is pretty spectacular. Arrowwood, viburnum, viburnum dentatum. So another great plant for the yard. And these are actually even great for screening. I mean, it's deciduous, but the berries will persist into winter, so it has a little winter appeal through all seasons, really. I have suggested this as screening more than one time, so or a hedge or a border. 6 to 10 feet tall and wide, so not quite as large as some of the others. Kind of this upright art with age, it kind of arches a little bit. Multi-stem tree, full sun to part shade. It has beautiful white blooms in May and June. And again, these little blueberries. So the berries are going to bring birds, and the nectar will bring butterflies. The foliage is actually quite glossy and beautiful. Here's some of the white blooms on the right and the left. Also, the Arrowwood viburnum has been cultivated a lot, not promoting proven winners, but these happen to be some images that we could use. So they have different colored berries. They have tighter, more dense flowers. Some of them have like the blue muffin on the right there. It's a little more compact size. So lots of different, cultivated varieties to choose from. And then finally, the Highbush blueberry, not always thought of as an ornamental. Yes, you could still get the berries from them, but they are really a stunning plant in the landscape. 6 to 12 feet tall and wide. So you've got, again, depending on the environmental conditions or perhaps which variety you have, they are kind of a slow grower. And they do like acidic soils. Okay, so that's something that you have to think about too, maybe even get a soil test before planting one of these. The lovely little white bell-shaped flowers in the spring then turn into our late summer blueberries. I don't know what the word need is just hanging out there for, my apologies. And then the fall color is just amazing. So really for all seasons type of plant. You can see at the top left there, the little white flowers. Bottom left and top right, the stunning fall foliage, and of course, our blueberries. And here's kind of a row of them. You can see all together, they do make kind of a nice border, even in the fall. Can't beat the fall color. So just want to remind you, this is the last species I'm going to discuss here, but always remember, choose your species wisely. We're going to put the right plant in the right place. That's why you've been provided all these kind of requirements of each of these plants, because you got to figure out what your place has and what plant will fit in there, right? So observe your soil conditions and all those other environmental factors before choosing a tree for your site. So with that, I'll let you know that you can view past recordings of Four Seasons Gardening on their YouTube channel. So kind as to take this brief survey. Let us know what you learned, what things you're going to do from here on out. So I'll leave this up for just a moment while I start turning to some questions here. I will go back and forth. I just wanted to put up my information. You are more than welcome to email me with further questions. I'm glad to help.